Welcome to Worst Anime Ever, a series where I reluctantly watch a variety of anime the general public considers to be completely fucking dogshit, or painfully mediocre at best, in a journey to find the worst one, or pleasantly come upon a hidden gem. Today we are looking at the anime titled Our Last Crusade, or The Rise of a New World, Season 1 in particular, due to Season 2 not completing its runtime yet, with a 6.7 on my anime list. A cautionary rating, but here is a brief description for those of you who only watch peak anime. Astral power, a formidable force wielded by both mages and witches, is feared by the Empire, leading to ruthless persecution. The oppressed mages form the Nebulous Sovereignty, sparking a century-long war. Iska, a skilled knight from the Empire, is imprisoned for freeing a captive witch, but is later released on one condition. He must hunt down the feared Ice Calamity Witch. Meanwhile, Alice Lu Nebulis 11, the witch he's tasked to capture, shares his dream of peace. Though on opposite sides their fates intertwine, forging an unlikely bond that challenges the war dividing their worlds. Now personally for me, I've always loved a good Romeo and Juliet style story, so when I first came across this anime's premise, I won't lie, I got a little fucking giddy. The idea of two characters from opposing sides, navigating a war-torn world while developing a forbidden bond sounded like it had so much potential. There were countless directions the story could go, and I was eager to see where it would take me. Unfortunately, the fucking writers for this shit made a critical storytelling mistake that holds it back: a lack of focus. For a setup like this to work, the focus of the story must be the dynamic between the two leads and their evolving relationship. But this show consistently strays from its strongest elements in order to focus on much weaker, shittier side plots and characters to give the illusion of a complex story when it didn't need to be. To better explain what I mean, let's talk about the characters that make this show compelling. Iska, a former saint disciple of the Empire, who was stripped of his title and imprisoned for a year after committing the crime of freeing a captive witch, an act considered treason for aiding an enemy combatant. Personality-wise, Iska is a calm, relaxed individual, but despite these traits, he will always stand firm on his beliefs and never wavers from them, refusing to bend even in the face of adversity or opposition. Now with that being said, Iska's character has one major flaw. On screen, he is a really fucking boring character to watch. He lacks the depth or quirks that would make him compelling. Not by himself anyway. He's designed to bounce off certain characters and use them as a stepping stone to massively elevate his own, which is why the other main character is so essential to making him work. Alice is Iska's opposite in all the right ways. On the battlefield, she's ruthless and unrelenting, a powerful force who shows no mercy to her enemies. But off the battlefield, she's a breath of fresh air. Alice is a lively, curious and adventurous young woman who loves exploring new places, experiencing different cuisines, and appreciating art from both nations, not just her own, despite her mother protesting against it. Her bubbly, passionate personality contrasts perfectly with Iska's calm, reserved demeanour. Whenever they share the screen, their chemistry clicks, creating an engaging back and forth that keeps you hooked. This dynamic is bolstered by the fact that even though they are from opposite sides of the war, they share the same dream for peace, which leaves the idea of potentially working together, despite the challenges it may bring, a possibility. While the anime's premise sets up Iska and Alice as the central pair, the truth is that this story thrives on a trio of characters. The third and final key pillar of this dynamic, ultimately adding to the story's uniqueness, is Alice's loyal aide, Reen Vispos. Reen is fiercely loyal to the sovereignty, even more so than Alice herself. She's cold, no-nonsense, and unwavering in her duty to protect Alice. But Reen's most interesting role is how she affects Alice and Iska's relationship. She despises Iska purely for being from the Empire, and wants nothing more than to drive a wedge between him and Alice. She glares at him, insults him, and even poisons his drink, pretending it's a gesture of goodwill, to knock him out, take him prisoner, and later attempt to kill him despite Alice's protests. However, what keeps Reen's character fantastic is that she actually grows throughout the story when it comes to her attitude towards Iska. There's a turning point where Reen faces off against a powerful enemy and is moments away from being killed, until Iska steps in and saves her life. After some hesitation, they team up and successfully drive the threat away. From that point on, her stance starts to shift. though she still dislikes Iska, she begins to respect him as a warrior and fellow rival. Slowly but surely, her icy hostility thaws. Not entirely gone, but softened. This evolving dynamic between Iska, Alice, and Reen is by far the anime's strongest asset. Watching the trio interact, Iska's calm composure, Alice's warmth, and Reen's relentless loyalty is genuinely entertaining. As mentioned before, Iska's character falls flat when he's on his own. However, the two other characters significantly elevate him, making his scenes far more engaging and enjoyable to watch. As much as I love the interactions between these three characters, the anime ultimately squanders its own strengths: the lack of focus. Instead of doubling down on the trio and letting their relationships deepen, the story constantly wanders off into dull, underdeveloped side plots and generic supporting characters who add nothing of value. If the show had simply centered around Iska, Alice, and Reen, fleshing out their bond while navigating the larger conflict, it could have been something special. But instead, the anime spreads itself too thin, leaving the main characters buried under pointless distractions. And that's what makes it so goddamn frustrating. The potential is right there, yet it's never fully realised. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. There is a side arc in the story involving Iska's squad exploring a location affected by a vortex, a phenomenon that boosts a witch's power based on its strength. Both nations send forces to claim this area, including Iska's squad. The problem? By this point, the only interesting, well-developed characters are Alice, Reen, and Iska. None of the other characters, including the rest of Iska's squad, are given enough depth to make them compelling in this arc, nor do they make any attempts to elevate my opinion of them, with the exception of maybe one squad member, and that's a big maybe. They're all generic, forgettable archetypes. Remember, what makes this so much more damning is that Iska simply doesn't work as a character without Alice or Reen to play off of. He's designed to complement their dynamic, not to carry the narrative alone. So, sticking him in an arc surrounded by dull, underdeveloped characters makes the whole thing feel like a slog. In fact, as a quick side note, it's not just this arc. Nearly half the series separates Iska from Alice and Reen, leaving him to make do on his own. The result? Half the show ends up feeling lifeless and meaningless. To make matters worse, the vortex itself turns out to be irrelevant. The show explains that this particular vortex is weak and barely enhances a witch's power, meaning whoever claims it doesn't actually gain any advantage. It's a pointless conflict with no meaningful stakes. So why the fuck are we here? You could argue this arc serves to introduce the villain, Lord Mask, but even that falls flat. He's teased as part of a larger power struggle within the sovereignty, including hints of a coup against the Queen, but none of it gets explored, at least not in this season. It's clear they're setting this up for Season 2, but the coup itself feels frustratingly vague. Aside from Lord Mask, I have no idea who's involved or what's driving the rebellion, and the very few characters who are connected to it are barely explored, which leaves this season feeling hollow and incomplete. If the writers had focused more on the main trio instead, this emptiness wouldn't be an issue. In fact, it might have even made Season 2's events more impactful, but as it stands in its current form, it's not engaging, and it's not appealing. Now, as I have alluded to before, the only somewhat relevant character in Iska's squad is Captain Class. Personality-wise, she's as bland and generic as the rest of the squad, but she has one notable moment during the aforementioned Vortex arc. She gets kidnapped by a sovereignty spy posing as an Imperial soldier. Iska rescues her, but after a brief encounter with Lord Mask and his ally, a powerful witch from Alice's bloodline, Lord Mask kicks Class into the Vortex. When she escapes, it's revealed she now carries the witch's mark on her left shoulder, a symbol that grants her the powers of a witch, but also guarantees execution in the Empire, no matter the circumstances. This should make Class an incredibly important character, but despite the obvious setup, her new status as a witch barely matters. The squad's next mission requires them to infiltrate the sovereignty using fake witches' marks as a disguise. Conveniently, Class can just pass off her real mark as a fake one. The only potential tension comes from a mandatory medical checkup scheduled in a week after the infiltration mission to make sure the fake marks don't have any lasting effects. But even that falls flat. Why? Because Iska's squad gets ordered on a 2-month vacation due to excessive overtime. So instead of a week to figure things out, Class now has an absurd amount of time to deal with it. Any potential tension evaporates, leaving the whole subplot feeling like a waste of time. I'm not saying her Mark situation can't come up in Season 2, but there's not even a hint of build-up for it. Even if that is the plan, that's time that could have been spent on the trio, the characters we actually care about, but instead we focus on something that ultimately didn't do anything for the plot or its characters. The other arcs in the show tend to fall into the same familiar pitfalls. Admittedly, one arc does include moments that develop Reen and Iska's relationship. The same arc where Reen tries to kill him after taking him prisoner. However, it ultimately doesn't get enough screen time to fully explore their dynamic, especially when compared to the other side plot running alongside it, a side plot I don't fucking care about, and ultimately leads to nowhere. It's a shame really, because I absolutely love the chemistry between these two when Alice isn't around. Another arc centres around Sisbel, one of Alice's many sisters, and a candidate for the throne. Coincidentally, the same witch Iska freed from the Empire a year prior. Her storyline revolves around seeking Iska's help after hearing rumours of a potential coup. Unable to trust anyone, she believes Iska is the only person who can help her prevent a civil war within the sovereignty. However, Iska repeatedly refuses her requests, and during her final attempt to convince him, Lord Mask appears, aiming to frame Sisbel for treason. The biggest issue with this arc is that it would have been far more compelling if Alice were the one to uncover the coup and seek Iska's help instead. Iska has absolutely no reason to risk his life or his standing with the Empire for Sisbel, a girl he neither knows nor cares about. Frankly, as a viewer, I don't fucking care about her either, as she literally just got introduced during the last few bits of this season. If Alice had been the one to pursue Iska's aid, it would have made much more sense. By this point in the story, they've developed a genuine connection, and Iska has repeatedly supported her through sovereignty-related conflicts. It would have also provided a great opportunity to further strengthen Iska's relationship with Reen, which would have been a blast to watch unfold. But no, the writers fumbled the potential, failing to recognise a more organic, emotionally driven path for the story. In the end, this anime had all the ingredients to deliver an unforgettable, emotionally charged story, but it fumbled its own potential. The core trio of Iska, Alice and Reen brought a compelling, dynamic push and pull to the narrative that would have carried the entire show. Their chemistry, conflicts and evolving relationships were easily the most engaging parts of the series. But instead of honing in on that strength, the anime bogs itself down with lifeless side characters, pointless arcs, and underdeveloped plot threads that lead nowhere. It tries to set up future seasons while neglecting the present one, leaving this season feeling hollow and unfocused. I give this anime a 6 out of 10, and that's a generous rating because the only reason why it's this high is because of Alice, Reen, and Iska. If the writers had committed to exploring the trio's bond and the emotional weight of their forbidden connection, this could have been something truly special. Instead, we're left with a show that teases brilliance, but ultimately feels like a missed opportunity. But yeah, that's about it. If you made it this far into the video, then you definitely have to like and subscribe at this point, but past that, I'm gone.